Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Speaker for today's Samagam session is Mr. Shoaib Qureshi. He has 10 plus years of rich experience in managing large and complex software and IT infrastructure projects. Besides that, he is also a successful YouTube influencer with his channel PMC Lounge, the number one free resource on internet for PMP and other project management certifications. With him, we'll be learning about fundamentals of project management. Over to you, sir.
Sure. Should I be sharing my screen?
Yes, sir.
I guess you need to allow me to share it.
Just a moment, sir.
Sure. Yeah. In the meantime, I'd start off. I'd just like to congratulate, first of all, the operations and the general management club there at IIM Ranchi, because I've been following some of the people that you have invited, and it is, I mean, it's amazing the kind of people that you have, extraordinary speakers, and this is actually one of the biggest advantages of being in college. Once out of here, once you're out of your college, you are basically constrained to a specific domain, right? Right now you have the time to explore, you get the exposure from diverse set of people. I work in the IT industry, and it's very hard for me to kind of catch hold for someone who's a specialist in, let's say, some other industry, right? So after this brief session, it is possible that you might get interested to project management, into this industry of project management, and would want to pursue a career here. So with that, I think we have a packed agenda. Actually, I'll share my screen, and unfortunately, मैं सिर्फ वो कथा सुना के जा नहीं सकता. By the way, I hope you guys don't mind me using Hindi in between. But the point is, there is some level of educating and definitions and processes and stuff like that involved when we are talking about project management. So treat this as more of a class on project management, and feel free to take notes if you want to. I'll share my screen, and we'll get started. Cool. Let me know if you're able to see my screen.
It's visible, sir.
All right. So yeah, let's talk about some of the fundamentals of project management. And by the way, once again, thank you everyone for joining. You guys joining in on a Sunday evening. It feels good. It's Rajnikant's birthday also today. But anyways, so what exactly can you expect out of this session, right? One is, what is project management? The basic introduction to this discipline, this field of project management. And we'll also try and take a step ahead. Once you know the basics, right, we'll try to take a step ahead, and we'll get into a bit of intricate details into project management. And to leave you guys with, I'd also like to kind of share some industry trends of where the project management industry is heading towards. And that is some of the charts and graphs that usually you guys from the MBAs like to see. So I have put them together as well for you. So that's something that we'll cover towards the beginning. Some of the details about me here. Typically, I don't cover the part that you see towards the end, uh, because that's something where I thought that there's a thick line between these two. So, like Tanika mentioned in the beginning, this started off as a blog, something which was an after office kind of thing for me, where I was trying to share what project management is. Eventually, led into a YouTube channel where I thought, just writing might not be something that I would be able to explain certain concepts. So I started creating videos, and also, like I said, I always thought there was a thick line between these two, because this is the another side of me. This is where I thought, I can just share memes on Instagram and be myself. But yeah, Nenika actually reached out to me on Instagram, so I thought, maybe this line is imaginary after all. But anyways, let's move on. So what is the agenda for this session? Like I said, we'll first talk about the basics of project management. Then we'll try to get a bit deeper as well. That's where we'll get a little technical also about project management. and towards the end we'll try to cover some of the industry trends also. So let's start off, and we'll have some time in the end. I'm told that for any questions and answers that you may have, questions that you may have, and answers I'd hopefully have. So we'll take questions towards the end, but let's start off with the agenda about what exactly is a project. Now, I understand that this session is being organized by the operations club, but there is actually a fine line between projects and operations. So a project is actually temporary. It has a definite start and end date. So you have to have a defined scope and resources for your project, because it is temporary, it has a definite start and end date. And also, a project is unique. So a project is something which produces unique results. And the difference that it has with operations is that it is not a routine everyday operational work with repetitive output. So few things to basically take away from this slide is that a project is always something which is temporary. It will always have a start and an end date. It is not day to day operations. You're not walking in and doing repetitive stuff every single day. So that is what defines a project. A project is also unique. So all projects are essentially different. When we talk about operations, we might be doing routine everyday work, and we might be trying to ensure that the routine work is done efficiently, how we can make it more effectively. But when we talk about projects, it is unique, it is temporary, it has a fixed start date and a fixed end date. Now, let's talk about some of the projects. Now, these are some of the projects that you might have heard, right? These are world famous projects: construction of pyramid, construction of Great Wall of China, construction of Taj Mahal. All these are examples of project, because all of them are unique. All of them may not have a start and an end date. We don't know about what happened when these were being constructed, but all of these ended at a certain point, right? So all these projects, they produced unique result and they ended at a certain point in time. Now, these are also some of the projects. We talk about an astronaut landing on moon. We talk about designing a new car. We talk about creating a new software package. All of these are also projects. So in fact, this year there was a really good project that took place, and I think it was called Ingenuity or something, where there was a helicopter that was flown on Mars, in the environment of Mars. And that is a project as well, right? That's something which was unique. That's something which had a start and an end date. I'm pretty sure there was a project team involved there. So that's how projects basically work. Now, give me a second. I think the presentation is running on its own. So give me a second. All right, let's take it off again. So some not really practice, but something that we can how differentiate between a project and operation is setting up a cell phone factory. This is actually a project because it is something unique. It produces a unique output. It has a start and an end date, right? While assembling thousands of cell phones every day, that is operations. So that's how there's a difference between a project and operations. Similarly, we can also talk about how putting together a team of research analysts to come up with a design and a prototype of a waterproof phone within 6 months. This is a project. But at the same time, when you're manufacturing thousands of those phones, that is operation. So I hope we basically we're able to kind of understand the difference between a project and operations. Now, where do projects actually come from? What happens that these projects come into the being, right? So you have new technology coming up, you've got competitive forces, you may have material issues, political changes. All these lead to certain projects, customer requests, stakeholder demand. So you may have a software that is already out there in the market, and there are customer requests that they might be talking about having new features added. So that might also end up as a project in your plate. Sometimes legal requirements, GST has been rolled out, and you need to ensure that your software complies with GST. So that also results in certain projects where you need to make changes to the software. So all these business needs, social need, environmental considerations, all of these are factors which lead to new projects. So I hope this is a bit clear of where the projects come from, and what kind of projects these factors can actually result into. Now, one thing that we keep talking about whenever we discuss projects are project constraints. So this is a classic triple constraint triangle of a project. So what this means is you have time, cost, scope, and then of course you have a quality in between. So what this basically talks about is these are the constraints. So time is a constraint. Remember, a project has a end date and a start date and an end date, right? A fixed start date and an end date, which we might not call it fixed. Let's not call it fixed, but it has a start and an end date, right? A project will have certain budget. There will be cost associated with the project, and there will be certain scope of the project, right? You have to build Taj Mahal. That's the scope, right? And you may have your map, elevation of how it is going to look and all that. And then has to be certain quality attached to it in terms of how it should perform. So these are the constraints of a project. And why do we call them constraints? Because let's say you're doing a project which requires, let's say, $1 million, and you would want to complete this project in 6 months. Now tomorrow, if you have to complete this project in, let's say, 5 months because of certain customer requirement or any market changes or whatever, you might have to deploy more resources. You might have to deploy more team members. You might have to, let's say, purchase something which enables you to finish this project in 5 months instead of 6 months. What is going to happen is you are reducing the time side of this triangle, which means it is possible that the cost is going to increase. So it is possible that the cost increases. Now, it is also possible that the scope reduces for your project, right? Let's say the cost remains the same, but the scope reduces. So you will delivering, let's say, A, B, C, but now you will only be delivering A and B because the cost has come down. The scope for this project has come down and the cost has remained the same. So these constraints, like I said, are interrelated, and every time there is a change in one of these, it is going to result in change of other constraints as well. So it is also known as the iron triangle of project management. But this is very basic that we should know whenever we're talking about a project, right? Anything that you want to deliver, maybe construction of a house is a project. You might have certain time associated with it. You might have certain cost in your mind. You might have let's say certain scope. The scope is, of course, creating that building that house, right? So what happens after that is any change in any of these constraints is going to put strain on other constraints as well. So that's how this works, the iron triangle of project management. Now, there are some more constraints as well. You may have risks. You may have to take care of resources as well. So, you are, let's say, maybe you're building a bridge, but due to heavy rainfall, which you did not account for, due to heavy rainfall, the construction has been delayed by 15 days. So that is also one of the constraints. That is one of the risks that you should plan for when you are planning for your project. So let's say your project is going to start in January, the construction of the bridge, and is going to end in let's say December. In between there are 3 months of heavy rainfalls, and that is something that you should account for when you are preparing your project plan. So these are some of the constraints. Now of course I can talk about more constraints, because when you are actually on the ground delivering projects, you would realize that these are just the 6 very basic constraints that we are talking about. There are much more constraints involved. Resources is also a problem. So let's say COVID struck, and a lot of your resources, people working on your project, human resources, team resources, they left for their hometown, and now you're left with no team resources, right? So that's something that is also a constraint, and it is going to increase the cost, it is going to increase the time, it is going to, maybe your scope of the project remains the same, you still have to construct the bridge, that remains the same. But these are the kind of constraints that are going to impact the way your project performs. Now all of this is fine. How do you define a project being successful, right? You were constructing a bridge. How will you define that once you're done constructing the bridge, your project was successful? So there are certain factors that come into play here. Number one is the schedule, right? So how you're going to ensure, you may have to evaluate your progress as you go. You will have a schedule in place, right? So you need to ensure that if there's any schedule slippage, you address them timely. But overall, what this slide is trying to tell you is that schedule is basically a factor when it comes to defining whether your project was successful or not. If it was a 1 year long project and you took 1 year 2 months to complete it, well, you didn't really did well on your schedule part of the project being successful, right? You were delayed basically. So schedule is one thing. Here is an example. The original deadline for Bangalore Metro phase 1, that was March 2010, but they missed out on 9 subsequent publicly announced deadlines. And the phase 1 metro, it was finally opened to public on October 2011. So this is a failure in terms of not meeting your schedule. So that is one of the factors that defines whether a project was successful or not. The second one is cost. Of course, I mean, it's all about the money, honey. If you are spending too much on a project which you shouldn't have, whatever the budget was, right? That's something which is ultimately going to, your stakeholders are going to tell you that this project wasn't as successful as we thought it could be, because you've spent a lot of money which you were not supposed to in the initial budget of the project, right? So again, what you can do is you need to evaluate, you need to look forward, and of course there are, when you read about project management, you will find how you do these methods of reforecasting, how you look forward, how you prepare a budget. All of that is into the thick of, when you get into the thick of project management, you'll understand all of that. But cost, again, what this slide wants you to take away. Someone's having a lot of fun. All right, we good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yeah, what this slide wants you to take away with yourself, yourself away with, is cost is also one of the factors when it comes to the success of the project, right? So this is the takeaway from this slide. Here's another example from Bangalore Metro. It said that 33 km of Bangalore Metro phase 1 work had a baseline cost of 6,000 some crores. But due to delays and extension of metro work, there was actually an increase in scope, right? Earlier it was 33 km, but then it increased to 42.3 km. And the final cost came out to be some 14,405 crores. So that's how you basically spent more than you basically stood out for, right? So that's something where cost is also a factor. The next one is quality. And quality, again, quality depends on what is expected out of your project, right? So the end product of your project, the end product could be Taj Mahal, the end product could be a Nokia phone. What is expected out of it? If it is meeting that expectation, then it is good quality, as simple as that. So when you compare two phones, let's say when you compare a Nokia phone with the latest iPhone, you might say that both of them have good quality, because if your let's say your requirement out of a phone is just to make a phone call, a dumb Nokia phone is also good quality for you. But if you have a lot of if you have more requirements, if you want to use a smartphone, then of course the quality for that Nokia phone for you in your case is not going to be as good as let's say the latest iPhone, right? So quality should be reviewed timely, and this is something that project managers are going to do. They are expected to do. And again, quality standards should be well defined and they should be accessible throughout the project. So you need to define that, we are building a dumb Nokia phone. What is the standard, right? The quality standard. What is our, let's say we call it quality criteria, basically. What is our quality criteria? It should be able to make phone calls. It should be able to send SMS. That's all. You don't really need, you might not need internet on it. So that could be the quality criteria for that phone, while a different quality criteria or a standard could be defined for when you're creating a smartphone. So that is something that you do. And while you go over the project, and by the way, all these are stuff that a project manager is supposed to do. He is supposed to take care of ensuring this your project is on track when it comes to schedule, on track when it comes to cost, you are meeting the quality, right? So here's an example. The food is not good here. That movie is boring. This phone is really bad. That car is a work of art. Bangalore metro is pretty crowded. Now, all of these, if you kind of pay attention, all of these are not well defined quality criteria. The food is not good here. It could be, some people might find it good, some people might not find it good, right? There's no scale, there's no unit that it is being measured on. That movie is boring. Again, there's no scale, there's no unit when it comes to how boring that movie is. The phone is really bad. Again, you're not really defining the quality criteria well here. So that's something which has to be done when it comes to projects. You need to have a well defined criteria. It should not be as generic as what you see here. The next is stakeholders satisfaction. So stakeholder is basically every person who is going to be positively or negatively if affected by your project. That person is a stakeholder. Now, when you see all those surveys out there, all of them are out there for a reason, right? So you've got qualitative checks as well. You don't really have to do, ask people to rate something from 1 to 10, right? There are qualitative checks as well, where you might require ask your stakeholders to give you feedback, and it could be just text, it could be just words. You can ask them, how you're working on the project, how is it going along, right? What do you think about the rest of the project team? So those are some of the qualitative checks as well that you as a project manager can take up when it comes to stakeholder satisfaction. Of course, you can always do the quantitative part of it. You can always prepare a 5-question questionnaire and ask them to rate how we are doing from 1 to 10 and all that. But that's how stakeholders satisfaction is taken care of, right? So here's an example. The presence of a high pressure petroleum pipeline forced the Bangalore metro route to the airport to be altered. So we were actually supposed to have the Bangalore metro to the airport be functional by now, as per the initial plan that was there. But now, because of this high pressure petroleum pipeline, it had to be altered. So what this means is the Bangalore-Mangalore petroleum pipeline that has all of a sudden become a stakeholder in your project, because they are positively or negatively impacted by your project. So these are some of the things which are pretty obvious, right? These are, if you're working on a project, you can yourself think of stuff like these, that the scope, the schedule, the cost, the quality, all these are some of the factors that are going to determine if your project is successful or not. But then comes alignment to business case. So let's say, what was the original benefit that your project set out to meet, right? So your original benefit was to take people off the road and have them travel in metro. That is the business case. That is why your project was basically took birth, and that is why you were doing that project, right? So that alignment to business case is also something that you as a project manager need to take care of. So do the problems that led to the project being conceived still exist, or are you working on something that nobody wants? Today you can, so I'm not sure if you guys are aware of VCRs, but there used to be VCRs earlier, and there used to be VHS tapes that you can attach, that you can put into the VCR, and the VCR gets attached to your TV, and you can watch movies like that. You might develop the best VCR in the world today, but nobody really wants to use it. So that is the alignment to the business case that you need to take care of. That kind of business case of creating the best VCR in the world, that is not going to give birth to a project today. So when it comes to metro, what if people find shared cabs a better, more convenient and cheaper alternative to metro? If there is let's say 10,000 more apps that come up tomorrow, which make it much more easier and much more convenient for people to get shared cabs, then perhaps you need to take a look again at your business case, or as to why do we need a metro, and do we still need a metro. So that's also something which falls in the bucket of a project manager, and these are basically some of the things that you as a project manager need to take care of when it comes to ensuring that your project is a success or not. So you might deliver the project on cost, you might deliver the project in time, great quality, but the business case has changed and nobody wants to use the product of your project, and that means the project was actually a failure. Now, that is all about a project. Let's talk about project management. What exactly is project management? Now, of course, this is where you apply all the knowledge, skills, methods, experience, everything that you have learned so far, um, and you apply all that on the project activities to meet whatever the objectives that the project has. A website or a software, all of this, developing this is actually a project. Relief effort is also a project. Construction of a building, bridge, all of these are examples of project. Remember our initial definition that we took up, right, of a project, that it is unique, it has a start date and an end date. All of these three examples stand true to it. Now, project management is basically a function, and business leaders, the exec level people, they understand this, and that is why they hire people who specialize in project management. They are project managers, and that is that's how they apply all these skills, knowledge, methods that they have learned so far in their career. So that is what project management is in a nutshell. Now, we've talked about projects a lot, right? We talked about what are the success criteria of a project. We've discussed all that, but there is a higher level of projects as well. When we go higher, you will find that you are doing stuff which cannot be defined as projects, and you are doing stuff which is a compilation of several projects. That is where programs and portfolios come into the picture. So programs, these are basically group of related projects, and they may provide certain benefits when you manage all these projects together. So let's say managing the development of all e-commerce websites. If you are let's say a company that develop websites, you can perhaps bundle all your e-commerce development projects together, and that can be an e-commerce website development program within your organization. So that is what programs are. Now, we took examples of projects, right? So, but if we say one of the programs, if we talk about one of the programs of the Indian government, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, right? that is actually a program. That is not a project. That doesn't have a start and end date. ऐसा कभी नहीं होगा कि भाई सब कुछ साफ कर दिया है, now this project is over, right? ऐसा कभी भी नहीं होगा. That is a program. That is an ongoing thing. So within that Swachh Bharat Abhiyan program, there could be several projects, right? There could be a Ganga Safai projects. There could be 1 billion toilets to be created or stuff like that, right? Those kind of projects could be there. But overall, that is actually a program and not a project. That is not going to get completed. It doesn't have an end date, basically. Not to get completed is not the right thing to say. Anyway, so then we talk about, there is an equation for those of you from the mathematics background, right? Program is basically sub programs. There could be sub programs within programs, and then they could have projects and sub projects as well. Then we talk about portfolios, and portfolios are basically not just a group of programs, but they can also include projects within them. And that's where we can relate to portfolios as our ministries, right? There are, let's say, a home ministry. They basically have the portfolio, and that portfolio can have certain programs, certain projects, but that is an entire portfolio related to home ministry. So the example here is managing all types of website development related projects and programs can be a portfolio, but then you may have, so your organization may have different portfolios as well. So you are now basically managing all website development work within one portfolio, and then you are also managing development of all apps within another portfolio. So that's how portfolios basically come up when it comes to an organization. Now here's basically a diagram of sorts which kind of tries to explain the difference between projects, programs, portfolios, and how it all basically lays out, right? So that was some of the basics to kind of understand what project is, what a project is, what project management is, and what are the higher level items when it comes to projects. You also deal with programs and portfolios. So if there are any questions so far, we can take them. But if there are no questions, we can then further move on to understand more about project management, dive a bit deeper. This was all bit of basics. We've not really gone into any technical details, so to say, when it comes to project management yet. We can anyways take questions towards the end as well if there are no questions right now. But these are the items that we've already basically covered. Now let's talk about project manager. So project manager, he's the person basically assigned to complete the project, right? And this, so you may have different managers here. You may have a functional manager, you may have an operations manager, and this gives you a difference between these three types of managers. So you have a project manager. He's the person assigned by the performing organization to lead the team that is responsible for achieving the project objectives. But then you have a functional manager as well. And the functional manager focuses on providing management oversight for a functional or a business unit. Now think of it like this. You're working in an IT company, right? And you're a project manager. And it is possible that your role is basically an IC role. You are an individual contributor. Nobody is reporting to you. But if you're working on software projects, you need people, you need coders, you need testers, you need designers, right? This is where functional manager comes into the picture. So he takes care of a functional or a business unit. A functional manager may have 10 coders reporting to him, and 3 out of those 10 are part of your project. So that is how functional manager is basically also taking care of people. He's a people manager of sorts as well, but he is focused on his basic function. That could be coding, that could be testing, that could be designing and stuff like that. And then you have operations manager as well. And these people, you may have, let's say, security part of a security department within your IT company, right? And security is something that is run by a set of security managers who are basically taking care of what's happening in the world of security out there, what all are the vulnerabilities out there, what are the hackers doing these days? Do we need to have any hackathon, invite them? So these are operations managers that are taking care of security aspect of the IT side, right? Security aspect of the kind of software that you are basically delivering. Now, PMI talent triangle, PMI is basically Project Management Institute. They provide certain certifications when it comes to project management. PMP is their flagship certification. Then you have CAPM. There are several certifications, right? You can check their website out, pmi.org. But they define this talent triangle. So will not go into the details of all of these, but what they talk about is there are three areas under which a project manager should have skills of, right? So you've got strategic and business management, then you have technical, and then you have leadership. So all these are the skills that you as a project manager, we talked about the different kind of managers in the previous slide, right? Now as a project manager, what all skills should you have? This is defined by PMI, and they call it PMI talent triangle. Now PMI being the the biggest body providing project management knowledge and project management certifications out there, in the industry also agrees to all of this. And so when PMI designs something like this, they've already worked with the industry experts to come up with something like this. Now we go into details and we talk about organizational structures. Now we talked about project manager, where does he stand, he or she stands. He or she could be an individual contributor as well, right? We talked about functional manager, we talk about operations manager. How are these determined? What is the kind of organization structure, right? So organization structure type, whatever that is available for use, and how do you optimize them for your given organization? These are the two variables that decide it. Now there are different types of organization structure which we are going to go over, the last four that you see on this slide, right? But you will find when you go into the corporate, you will find that I cannot call my organization a functional organization, I cannot call my organization a projectized organization. And that is where the number fourth option comes into the picture, because it is likely that if you start your own company tomorrow, or if you go into working for any of the companies tomorrow, you'll realize that all of these are end of the day hybrid organizations itself. So we start off with functional organization, and this is where we talked about how you have a functional manager, and there are 10 coders or 10 designers or 10 testers reporting to a test manager, a coding manager, or a development manager, or a designing manager, or whatever, right? So that is a functional organization where you have a functional manager who is taking care of all the people under him, and then there is a project manager who is basically an individual contributor. He does not have anyone reporting to him. He has people coming in from these different functions, and all of them come together and try and deliver a project. Next is matrix organization, and within matrix organization you are going to find three types of organization: weak, balanced, and strong. Now what happens here is that PM, the project manager, has some kind of authority, but you still don't have anyone reporting to you. You still have different functions, you still have different functional managers, and you take human resources from those functional managers, which become part of your project, and then you try and deliver the project, right? The one thing that happens here in matrix organization is that the resources are going to report to both. So although you are not responsible for granting leaves to your people working on your project team members, that's still something that the functional manager does, but you also have some authority over them. They also report to you in terms of how much work they have accomplished, right? So if you had let's say a coding complete date or a construction complete date, you can reach out to them every week and ask for status, and they are going to report the status to you. So that's the crux of matrix organization. Balanced is where PM and FM, they are going to share same level of authority, and strong is where the PM has higher authority. But like I said, on ground, when you join an organization, you will not be able to make out what kind of organizational structure this organization has. But one thing, one kind of organizational structure that you can easily make out when you walk in that is a projectized organization. And this is where you have the highest authority. And this is typically your construction projects, right, where people are actually reporting to the project manager. The project manager is responsible for their uh, you know granting them leaves, hikes, their development goals and all that, everything. It is project manager's job to do so. So that's something that's called projectized organization. And like I said, typically in construction environment is where you will find this. One of the problems with this kind of organization is that resources have no home after project completion. So you basically put together a project team to, let's say, construct a building. Once the building is constructed, the resources will have to go and find a new home or a new project to work on. So that is projectized organization. Again, this is somewhere closer to real world. You will be able to find some organizations that have this kind of projectized environment. Now, it is possible that within the organ, it's not like, once the building is constructed, everybody loses their job. It is possible that all of them are part of the same company, same organization. It's just that after the construction of that building, the company gives them, assigns them a new project, a new construction of a new building, right? And you might not have similar resources working for you as you had in the previous project, right? So that is also possible. But projectized organization is you are most likely to have new people work with you on every single project. Now comes composite or hybrid organization, and this is where you will find most of the real life companies out there. They fall in this category. And this is where all of the organization structures that we just talked about, all of them put together into one organization. And we basically, you may have different departments. What this means is you will have different departments that have different kind of organization structure. So some department within your organization is a balanced matrix organization structure, that is following a balanced matrix, but some other is following a projectized organization structure, right? So most companies out there, you will find that they use all kinds of organization structures, and which is basically the last point on this slide, which says that all modern organizations, they follow composite organization structure. So what is important for us to understand out of these organization structures is that you as a project manager, when you walk into a certain organization, you should be able to understand what kind of organizational structure does this company follow, or what kind of organizational structure does this department follows. And that way you will be able to make out what kind of roles and responsibilities you have, what kind of authority you basically have. So, but like I said, most organizations that you're going to walk in, they will have all khichdi, all kind of organizational structures put into one. Now, next is PMO. PMO is basically a project management office. This is a department that several companies have. And this is where junior project managers join in. And it is basically an organization that is defining how projects will be managed within an organization, right? So what they try to do is they try to standardize and introduce economies of repetition. So if you're uh, let's say you walk into a company, your job is in a company which creates websites or which creates apps. Now you know that there is economy in terms of economies of repetition. There is some kind of economies of repetition that you can bring into the picture, because end of the day all of these are apps, end of the day all of them are going to run on Android or iOS or whatever, right? So your let's say testing hardware can be something which can be, let's say, distributed across. Now who decides how this gets distributed? That's where a PMO comes into the picture. This is a department within your company, and they are going to standardize how company is going to deliver projects. Now, there are different types of PMO, typically three types of PMO. You have supportive, controlling, and directive. Now, supportive is where, they can provide you certain template that, you say that I'm working on creating an app, and it is an iOS app, and what I need is I need to raise a request for 10 MacBooks that my testers can use to test this app, right? So the PMO might be able to provide you a template that this is how you raise the request for getting 10 new MacBooks, right? So this was just an example, but basically it is something where supportive PMO is out there to support the project manager in whatever kind of requirement that the project manager may have. Then you have controlling PMOs. This is where it gets a bit serious. This is where they may have auditors within the PMO, and they might come to your project and they might ask you, okay, how is your project doing? Do you have all these documents? Do you have weekly sync up meetings with your project team members? And stuff like that. Are you maintaining all the documents? Are you updating the status of the project? All that is something that a controlling PMO can do. And then there is a directive PMO as well. And by the way, you will find that uh, different organizations are going to have different types of PMO. So you will find these three in real world based on the organization, of course. So directive PMOs is basically a group of project managers. And if there is a new project, somebody is going to come to the directive PMO and they are going to ask that, hey, we have this project idea and we need a project manager. So the directive PMO is going to assign a project manager to the project, right? So you will find that different organizations have different types of PMOs. Now, practice is something that we can skip. It basically goes into the examples of these different types of PMOs that we just discussed, right? So that's something. Let's talk about project stakeholders. Now, I talked in the somewhere in the between that anyone who will be affected, be it positively or negatively, by the outcome of your project is actually a project stakeholders. And you as a project manager, you need to ensure that you have identified all the project stakeholders and you also are managing their expectations. So obviously there can be negative stakeholders as well. We have seen that in several projects. If you are constructing a metro and it, let's say, it requires you to maybe cut down a few trees, you will have environmentalists who are going to be, for you, from your perspective, they are negative stakeholders because they are against this, right? Although let's not get into the environmental debate, but you need to basically understand that there is a possibility that there are negative stakeholders in your project as well. So three things that you should remember about stakeholders is that not all stakeholders have the same power or impact. So that is possible. Someone could be a negative stakeholder, but they might not have the power to impact your project. They might not have the power to affect your project. You can still be able to deliver your project. Second is, not all stakeholders will always be satisfied. So you're not running a popularity contest here, right? You are running a project, and you need to understand that not all stakeholders will always be satisfied, and at the same time they don't have to be satisfied as well. So that's some of the things that you should remember about stakeholders. Quickly, the last thing that we want to talk about here are some of the project management life cycles. And I'll quickly go over this because I know we are running out of time as well. So basically, you have different types of life cycles that your project can run through. So there are 5 types of life cycle. You've got predictive, adaptive, which is also known as agile, iterative, incremental, hybrid. The last one is, of course, hybrid. So predictive is where it is known as waterfall model. You basically plan the work and then you work the plan. So you've planned the entire project. Think of it as constructing a house. The entire house is out there on the paper, right? You have the elevation and whatever they call it. I'm not aware of the civil engineering terminologies, but you have the entire house in your hand when it comes to that elevation plan or whatever, right? But you've basically planned the work and now you're working the plan. So this is a predictive life cycle. And here's an example of it as well. You basically take the requirements first, then you design it, then you implement it, verify, maintenance, whatever. So that's how a project runs when it comes to a predictive life cycle. The next one is adaptive life cycle, where there can be changes if required. And this is the in thing. This is agile, and this is something which a lot of companies are moving towards to now. So what happens is all project activities, they are performed several times, delivering small piece of project every time. Now this is important. So let's say, let's take an example. If you're creating Facebook today, right? So you don't want to follow the waterfall model, because then it is going to take maybe a year for you to create a website like that. What you can do is deliver smaller pieces of Facebook to the customer every once in a while, right? That time can be defined, of course. So you may, first of all, you may deliver a functionality that the user can come in and they can create their profiles. Then you can, in the next iteration, you can deliver a functionality that the users can basically upload photos. So that is adaptive life cycle. Now there could be changes, right? When it comes to photos, there could be changes from the sponsor of the project, the one who is giving you money to deliver Facebook to them, right? There could be changes, and that is the beauty of adaptive life cycle, that it is ready for changes. It is a change driven life cycle. So now we'll go to the next. So this is one thing that I'd like to share. Where it go? Yeah, the last one. So this is how it basically works in sprint. You have a plan, you design, you build, test, review, and then you launch. So this is not the entire project, right? This is a piece of project, and then you again plan, design, test, build, review, and then you launch. But you cannot, of course, construct a house like this. So this is the difference between adaptive and the fully planned waterfall life cycle. Then you have iterative life cycle. This is closer to the first one that we talked about. Now there are again iterations, but iterations to accommodate if there are any changes. But the approach is to develop the basic functionality or the minimum viability of the product in the first iteration. So whatever the entire structure, the minimum structure, that is the first thing that you deliver, right? I have an example here. So this is the Mona Lisa painting, and what you're basically doing is you've delivered the basic functionality in the first iteration, and then you move on and build on top of it. Similarly, if you understand the incremental life cycle, this basically has more to do with the agile way of delivering, and this is how incremental life cycle works. So you again are delivering project in small pieces, but you are delivering the entire it in its entirety, right? You are not delivering just the basic or the MVP. Hybrid is basically a mixture of all this. You will find projects that basically follow hybrid. It depends. A certain part of a project can be predictive, the other part could be adaptive. Now you as a project manager, you need to define what kind of life cycle your project is going to follow. Now this is where I'd request you to wake up. There are some charts that I'd like to show. All of these are from PMI. So by 2030, they in the talent gap survey, they say that 77 million project management employees out of the current workforce will be left due to retirement. So you have enormous openings coming up when it comes to project management jobs. Right now, project management oriented employment, you've got here the PMOE is estimated to grow from 3% to 3.2% by 2030. And then here are the top 25 countries that pay the highest when it comes to project management related jobs. Now, of course, this is basically in US dollars. The salaries were in US dollars, so they have not taken into account the cost of living and all. But these are, on the whole, these are the top 25 countries that pay the highest. Now we talked about I don't think we talked about this, but this is basically a question that they ask. Please characterize your organization's approach to ways of working to address problems and need. We talked about the life cycles, right? The agile one, the change driven, that is the latest way of working. That is the latest way of delivering projects. And you can see that 30% are still following the traditional plan the work the plan kind of projects, and 32% they are embracing new ways. What are the kind of projects you can expect? Cloud solutions, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 5G, mobile internet. You'll hear all of them when it comes to projects, because these are the kind of thing these are the kind of projects related to technologies, the projects that are being delivered. Now, some of the digital age skills that are required for project delivery, and we are seeing projects using all of these when it comes to the kind of projects that we are delivering today as well. So these are some of the skills that PMI again thinks in one of their reports that should be required for project managers. And finally, there are 6 insights in one of the report uh, which talks about the future of the projects. Right now, the first one, it's about Africa, how it is home to, Africa is the next big thing. That's what a lot of people say. Then insight 2 is climate change, and we are bound to see projects related to climate change in the coming uh, years. Then we talk about AI. We talk about then the next one is globalization, but it is not really, how some of the countries, due to their political environment, were against globalization in the recent past, but it is not really affecting the teams and the kind of projects which have a global outlook and are being delivered globally. There is an infrastructure gap, so you may have infrastructure related projects as well. And then again, security is something that is talked about in the sixth insight. So these are the 6 insights. These are the kind of projects that we can see in the coming years. So if there are any questions, we can take them. Although I know, oh, we have 2 minutes. Okay. So if there are any questions, we can sort of take them. But that was, I hope I was able to kind of explain in terms of basics of project, fundamentals of project management, and also was able to kind of give you some charts, figures, graphs in terms of what you can expect when it comes to projects and project management in the future.
When you can go for the question.
Okay. Am I audible, right? Okay.
Hey.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir, for having such a wonderful session on the project management. So actually, my question is regarding for the project management you have mentioned, like there's a PMP certification which we get from the PMI. So, sir, actually, in one of my work experience, I worked and I got to realize that there are so many professionals who find it very difficult to crack that examination, particularly because, as far as I have seen, the questions were quite of like the situational based. So, I just wanted to know, like, if we are a project manager, then is it like we are confined for a single particular project? Like, if I'm an IT project manager, can I shift to some other sector or industry, or like the work will be same, or like there are some technicalities which will vary as per the requirement? So that's my question, sir. I hope it's clear.
Excellent question. Actually, excellent question there. So 2 things to understand here is, one, when it comes to PMP is industry agnostic. It does not apply to a single industry. So you can be a PMP certified construction project manager, PMP certified IT project manager, PMP certified ABC project manager. That's one thing, because the concepts that you need to study when it comes to project management, they apply to all industries alike. So that's one thing. Second is, there are, although parts of PMP certification that have to do specifically to the IT industry, because so I touched upon agile, right? Agile, you cannot really deliver just a kitchen when you're building a house, right? You cannot just deliver a kitchen to the customer and say, use this for now and I'll develop the rest of the house for you. So there are elements to it, but end of the day, PMP is industry agnostic. That's one thing. And secondly, yes, it is difficult to crack it, because most of the questions, I think 80 to 85% of the questions that you find on the exam will be situational based. You will be given a situation, this has happened, what should you as a project manager do?
Thank you so much, sir. That answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Vishnu, you can go next.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for the session. We really have learned a little about the fundamentals of project management. So, sir, my question for you is, like in our day-to-day life for a project manager, there'll be various instances where he has to face conflicts among between the stakeholders. So, in your opinion, what will be, how can you resolve this conflicts between this CFT or the cross-functional teams effectively, sir?
So, I mean, this is our bread and butter, right? Dealing with conflicts, and especially when you don't have any authority over your team members, they are not reporting to you. You are not responsible to their hikes next year. So, one of the things that I personally do is define the conflict. First of all, let's get all the names and people out of the way. Let's just define what the conflict is. Um, so I'll give you an example. We use a software called Jira, and we ask engineers to update the status of the features that they are working on in Jira. And you will find that some of the engineers don't want to update Jira. They are comfortable in coming into the weekly team meeting and giving you the status, but they don't want to get down on the keyboard and type what the status is. So as long as you are not too stuck with the thing that you have to update Jira, you should be able to avoid this conflict and resolve it, right? Because end of the day, the problem that you have in hand is you are not able to get the status of the feature. If somebody is okay to come to the meeting and give you the status, you should be good with that. You should not be behind them to update Jira, because that's something that you feel like should be done every week, right? So I think defining the conflict itself uh, solves half of the issues, right? The second thing I'd also suggest is, let's focus on the solution. Let's not focus too much on finger pointing or following the processes, because sometimes when the rubber meets the road on real life, that is something that you need to sort of compromise on. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. That helped.
Sakshi can go next.
Good evening, sir. Thanks for the session. It was great. My question was on a non-technical side. I wanted to know if there are any specific soft skills that might have helped you in your career as a project manager.
So
So far.
conflict resolution is one thing that we just talked about, right? You have to deal with a lot of people on a daily basis. Uh, One other thing is, in addition to conflict, I think one other thing is just personal rapport that you need to build with people. Because end of the day, I would say, if I have to define this role in 3 words, I would say influence without authority, as simple as that. So you have no authority over people, but you have to influence to get work done. So that is, whatever that entails, influence without authority is something that you need to develop, as simple as that. For some people it could be, some people don't like emails, so you should be comfortable in giving them a phone call. Some people don't like to talk while they are in office. They don't want to have water cooler conversations, so you should be comfortable in meeting them in the bar after 6:30. So as simple as that.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Nikita, you can go next.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for such an informative session. So my question goes like, in current work from home and hybrid era, is it possible to handle these projects remotely, and which project management method is preferable in that case?
So, I mean, we don't have any options, to be frank, when it comes to work from home, right? So, yeah, I mean, it is possible. Again, you have to take your communications and the way you deal with your project team members up a notch, because they are not sitting right across you. You cannot walk to their desk and ask what happened to that feature that you were working on. So that's something that you need to work on. You have to get, more friendlier with them, with your project team members. We don't really have any options. And the other question that you had was the kind of project method, right? Now that, more than working from home, that depends on the kind of project. So and again, also the mindset that your team comes in, right? So you may, if you want to follow agile and you have a set of 10 requirements, you want to have your coders build the first 2 requirements itself. The coders should also be comfortable in being able to work on those 2 requirements without seeing the rest of the staircase, right? So they should be able to, take their first step and second step before even they see the entire staircase. So that's something that you depending on the kind of project and depending on the kind of team you have, that is something that you need to take a decision on.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Nanika. Good evening, sir. Thank you for such a great experience that we had. And for my question, sir, I'm a sales person. I want to go pursue sales. So, how can we relate sales with project management?
Oh, you take your each sale as a project, right? You treat your each sale as a project. Your project is to make that next 10,000 US dollar sales. And how do you pursue it? What is your scope? What is the time that you allocate for yourself to complete that sale? How much it is, what is the kind of quality, what is the kind of products that you're going to sell? So you take your each sale as a project. You come up with the risks that you have in that project, right? What is the risk? The risk is that the person responsible to make the purchase might not be in a good mood today. The risk could be anything, right? So you treat each sale as a project, and the constraints that we talk about for a project, right? The iron triangle, the constraints that we talked about, you chalk out that for each of your sale and you treat them as a project, as simple as that.
Thank you, sir. This was really helpful.
Yeah.
Sagar, you can go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Thanks for the session. So my question is, how does a project manager handle risk in a project?
So again, we are now getting into the thick of project management. So there are actually textbooks written on risk management. There are several theories on how you can, mitigate risks. So you can mitigate risk, you can avoid risk, you can share risk. So all these are different methods. So I'll give you an example. So we talk about health insurance, right? Health insurance is a kind of risk management that we do. We never know what could go wrong with us tomorrow, and that is why we have health insurance in place. That is where you are basically mitigating that risk of that heavy hospital bill that you might have to pay if you didn't have health insurance. So you need to define the risks, what are the risks for a project, and then you need to find out how do you mitigate those risks. Now sometimes it is possible that there are risks which cannot be solved, which cannot be mitigated. They will not go away. There is a risk that all of us are going to die one day, but that does not mean that we stop living. So there are certain risks, and I'm sorry to take that example, but there are certain risks that project managers need to live with and work on. So yeah, that's how it is.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, Yashas.
Hello, sir. Thanks for the insightful session. So when I was going through an article on recent and future trends in project management, I came across the importance of emotional intelligence in a project manager. So what is your opinion on the emotional intelligence part in the project manager, and how does it impact the overall performance of the manager as well as the team?
So let me ask you a question. You are a project manager and you have a deadline for, let's say, this Friday. Today is Wednesday. And what you need to do now is basically have one of your testers uh, review the code that has been built by the team. And he is able to do this in 2 days. So you have 2 days time. But on a Wednesday evening, he calls you and he says that, and this is again a very, very important project, must meet that Friday deadline, and everything is on track. This is just the last thing that needs to happen. And this guy who's supposed to do it, he calls you and he says, my mother is not feeling well and I need to take off for the next 2 days. What would you do?
So I can delegate the work to someone who is expert in that field, or
But
if
it's
I
Wednesday post lunch, right? And that other person might be working on some other projects, right? It's not like people are free. It's not like people are still doing their studies and have some free time, right? It's corporate environment. Everyone has projects.
yeah. So I think that's where emotional intelligence comes into picture.
So one thing to note here is you cannot say no to that person, because if you say that, hey, this is $1 million deal that we have to meet that date, and yes, I know that your mother is not feeling well, but don't take any leave and complete this. You cannot say that. That's the part of where emotions come into the picture, right? You have to accept that. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to let your stakeholders and project sponsors know that unfortunate situation has occurred and this has happened, and we are going to miss out on our deadline. That's how you kind of basically take care of a situation like this. And this is where these are like real life examples, right? This is going to happen to you when you actually work on projects.
Yeah.
And I'll give you, okay, so if we have a minute or two, I can give you another example. Is that okay, Nanika?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in certain countries, and I'm not naming any country, but in certain countries, it is okay to give bribes. All right. Now, let's say you are working on a IT infrastructure project, and you have ordered 5 servers, refrigerator size servers that are coming in from another country, and they've landed on your port, the port of your country, right? And whatever cost that was required for you to basically do the procurement of those servers, get them to your office, all of that was part of the project. But now that the servers are there on the port, you realize that the officers are asking for some bribe, and you don't have that bribe accounted for as part of the cost of your project. Now, what should you do? You could either tell your stakeholders and sponsors that, hey, this is a normal practice here, and this is something that we need to take care of. You could either take a stand and you could say that, well, giving bribes is not something that I'm comfortable with. I'm a man of ethics and I'm not going to do it. To hell with the project. So again, that is where you need to take a call based on your emotional levels of intelligence, right, of what you're going to do at such a stage. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
So with this, we have come to an end to the session. Thank you, sir, for taking out time. I've just sent you a link for the feedback session. Please join the link. And once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. You all may leave now.
Yeah, thank you. You're all good to leave now. Thanks for taking the time on a Sunday evening. Have a nice day.